in December of 2011, we lived in Charlotte at the time, and we flew out west to spend the Christmas holidays with our daughter and her family. And my husband suffered a heart attack, had to be life flighted to another city because my daughter lived in a small town. And within the space of about 5 or 6 hours, he left Earth for heaven. And so it was very unexpected. And when April talked about identity, I know my identity is in Christ, but we have roles in life.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I wrote about was, well, if I'm not a wife, what do I do and who am I now? And I don't want to steal April's story either, but she was a pharmacist, and her identity was in a very successful career that she had invested a lot into, just like I had invested 42 years and 4 months into my marriage. And she hung up her pharmacist coat and put it in the back of the closet. And I took off my wedding ring and put it in the jewelry box. And so our lives became, and I think that is one of the things that really connected us together, was this idea of a changed life.
April, you met Marilyn at it was at the Billy Graham Center, I believe. That I've never been there, but I sure have heard a lot of people talk nicely about it. So did you walk up and I mean I heard the account, but I find it hard to believe that something that starts out is is your name Marilyn Nutter? That's what my name
Yeah,
tag
well,
says.
that's pretty much,
That's
Yes.
um,
up to this point, Marilyn and I um, we had become Facebook friends. Um, and all I had known of her was that little thumbnail image. So that was all I knew of her was her thumbnail image. And when we were it was the Asheville Christian Writers Conference at the Billy Graham Conference Center, known as the Cove, and I did. I saw her name tag and I read it and I was like, "Oh, are you my Marilyn Nutter and my Marilyn Nutter?" And we just connected. And sometimes in life there are just people like that. You just connect instantly, and it's like she and I had been friends our whole life, and we sat down outside that beautiful stone fireplace and we talked for hours. And I know for me, I went back to my hotel room that night thinking, Lord, what are you up to? Because I was still um, new in this whole process with I don't even think at this point I don't know what stage I was in the diagnosis. So it was still all new.
mhm.
I remember driving down with a friend, and that's why I was able to attend, because she was able to drive because I wasn't able to do all that. Um, and yeah, and Marilyn went back to her room and felt the same way. Like, Lord, what are you doing? Is there something here? So 4 years later, here we are.
Okay, Marilyn, you described the initial encounter.
Mm-hmm.
What was your initial reaction? There is, I will point out, a difference in the ages, not just in years, but in a generation. Here's this young lady that you were old enough to be her mother. I heard you say. What did you think? What did you think she was up to?
What did I think she was up to? Well, I heard her story, so I I knew that she was a young woman with a loss. She's about the age of my oldest daughter, so I identified, and I spent my most of my professional career in Christian higher education,
Mm,
so I absolutely love younger people. I spent a lot of time with college students and still are friends with my college students on Facebook. So I enjoy that generation. I enjoy that age. I knew she was very bright because she was a pharmacist.
mhm.
And of course, her love for the Lord came through to me. and her faith and how she was going through this very difficult time. And I had read her blog. That was it. She had a blog at the time called Red Chair Moments. And so I read her blog. So I knew something about her, but that conversation was really very sweet. And we felt we had known each other for a long time. And then we continued emailing, kind of like a long distance romance. We just continued emailing, and the rest is history.
April,
And we live in two different states. It's not only
of
two
course,
generations.
yeah, two
but we live in
generations,
different
two states, 2 hours, whatever. April, let's go back. Let's go back. What if after that first encounter that you had, you saw the name tag and identified her? What if someone would have told you that the two of you are going to do this? What would your reaction have been back then?
I probably would have been excited, to be honest with you.
Really?
Because prior to meeting Marilyn and attending that writers' conference, a friend of mine had a very small, intimate mini writers group at her home, and later they told me they did it for me because they wanted me to go to this writers conference. So they did it to help boost my confidence. But one of the things that the woman did, her name is Vi Herlocker, and she is an editor and a speaker often at writers conferences. And Vi gave everybody a tiny little galvanized bucket like that big, and you had to put in some ideas you had. And one of them was, I wanted to have articles published in a magazine other than just my blog, and to write a book. And so that was something that I put in that little bucket, which I have not found that bucket. I know I still have it, but I think it's in a box that still hasn't been unpacked. And we moved in this house about 3.5 years ago. But yeah, I do believe I would have been like, okay, this is how this is going to happen. This is how it's going to happen. And
It was probably divine appointments, but I think that a lot of people go to writers' conferences with at least a feeling, if not, in fact, a faith, that there's likely to be a divine appointment, and you kind of get your spiritual radar up at those events. And even though I'm not a writer, I have attended several Christian writers' conferences. Now, in the 4 minutes that we, or excuse me, 6 minutes that we have remaining, okay, I want to divide the time up as evenly as I can. Now, we can go a little longer than that, we have to, but I want whatever. Okay, April, I want you to set your stopwatch, and I want you to time Marilyn, because however long she takes, you have that long too. Fair enough?
oh goodness,
Okay.
no, I don't have any electronics with me.
All right. Well, all right. The book, which will be coming out soon, but let's talk about. There's two words here: destination and hope. And Marilyn, I want you to take the first word, because what I read that about the book, both words are manifest. Okay. I want you to share destination, and then when you get done, pass the mic over to April, and she will share about hope, because the book has both. It's written as a journey. I was trying to tee that up for you best I could.
That's okay. It was written as a journey, but let me share the rest of the title is A Traveling Companion When Life Falls Apart, because the book deals with mile markers and the path on our journey. And our ultimate destination, of course, is to land in hope continuously. But we know that it is a process. It's like grief is not linear. There are waves of grief. You move forward, and you move back a little bit, and then you move a little more forward, and then you may stumble down, and you have to pick yourself up. And one of the things that we say in the book is the hit that knocked you down is the one you didn't see coming, but you don't have to stay there. And so you don't have to stay at that destination of being down on the floor. And we have destinations in each stage of the path that we're taking, and we encounter different experiences. In grief, for instance, you may be doing fine, and then all of a sudden there's a trigger. That's
Mm.
one of the most meaningful chapters that we talk about in our book. For April, it was triggers. You know, you could hear a song, you could have a smell, you could watch a movie, and all of a sudden it brings back a flood
Mm-hmm.
of memories.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that moment, you're at that destination, but you don't have to stay there.
Mm.
And we cling to hope.
April?
April can, April can define how we look at hope.
Well, back in 2016, I choose a word every year, and in 2016, the word I chose was anchor. And the New Testament Christians use anchor as an anchor as a symbol for the word hope. And the writer of Hebrews 6:19, I'm reading this as I'm talking to you because I painted a picture and it's here in my office. And it says, "We have this hope as an anchor for our soul, firm and secure." And um, for the people listening and watching to us today, or even our future readers, everyone's going to come across some unexpected journey, some unwelcomed event. And as I mentioned earlier with Marilyn and I were talking earlier, and it's something God's been working in my heart is, how are you going to handle it? Are you going to drift, or are you going to dwell?
Hmm.
Those two things. Are you going to drift or dwell when your life turns upside down? Are you going to drift away from the Lord and drift into the crowd and what the world thinks you should do? Or are you going to sit and dwell and rest in God's presence? And if we dwell in hope and we dwell in God's promises, we will be anchored in Him and our hope in Jesus Christ. And whatever that circumstance for our listener or the reader might be, we've got Marilyn's story of grief and loss, and my story with a chronic illness. We have woven in probably 6 to 10 other stories of stories of women who have had to deal with infertility, incarceration, a prodigal child, financial reversal, um, taking care of a loved one with dementia. And in each of these stories, because it's not just her story or mine, each story we weave in a thread of hope for the reader. So that's why we call it a travel companion, because we want our readers and the listeners to know that you're not alone. Whatever you're facing, you're not alone. And link arms with us, and we can help pull you along, pull, drag, or just link arms in hope.
Marilyn, I want to go a little further. April just mentioned that part of the book is obviously drawn from your experience in the loss of your husband, her experience with chronic illness, but she mentioned others. Where did those other stories come from?
We sent out surveys to people. We had a call out on Facebook for people, and through our writers group and the contacts we knew, and some of the people we knew had remarkable stories. And we had surveys, asked them to tell their story, and then we selected some and asked them to write their narrative. We had to shorten some, edit them, and that's where the stories came from. The one in particular, Erin Odom has a story about having been on the mission field and called back, and she and her husband had tremendous financial challenges and have recovered from those. And that is a very special story to me because it was one of the very last acts of service that my husband did for them, was to give them some financial counsel. Mm-hmm. And it was the week before he died, actually. So, and she wrote a book, actually, that tells that story. Another one is Kathy Brundage. Her daughter was murdered, and I knew her as well. So we had some people, and I believe April knew the gal that was incarcerated. So some we knew, and some just came to us.
Marilyn,
And none of them are, no, go ahead,
how old was your husband when he died?
66.
66. Okay, April. Um, I'm glad, and there's a lot of books out there, but this one's different to me, and I don't say that often. And it's not because it addresses grief, because I think there are a lot of books out there on grief management and coping mechanisms. So while I'm certainly glad, it does not stand alone. We're all acquainted with grief, I think, to one extent. It's not even a matter of extent. It is my personal opinion that every one of us, that once you get to know someone, we are all walking through our own personal hell in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
I have faced many of the things that Marilyn enumerated in those examples. So, Marilyn, I lost my father suddenly, unexpectedly of a heart attack. He was 62 at the time. I've actually outlived my father. That was devastating, but I got through it. And I was adopted, so they were. I mean, I was like 20 something. Usually adoptions come in late in the marriage. You know what I'm saying? So, April, the hardest thing I've ever dealt with is not the loss of my father, not financial, marital, none of the things that Marilyn enumerated. The hardest thing I've had to deal with in the area of grief has nothing to do with my own grief. It was a friend of mine who lost his wife to breast cancer, and we don't even talk anymore. I've lost him as a friend. What advice is offered, or what hope is offered, either from yourselves or through your book, for the bystander, the friend of the person that's grieving? Do they just go out into Amazon and buy Destination Hope and hide it in their, where they'll discover it, or give them to them and say, you need to read this because you're not coping with this well? Is there anything you would say to those of us who have friends that are grieving, other than
First
buy
of
your
all,
book?
Well, I would like it if you bought our book.
Sure.
However, if you chose to, then you present it and you say, when the time is right, I think this book might help you. When the time is right for you to begin to read again, or when that helps. Marilyn speaks about some of the best advice she was given is grieve in a way that is right for you. Someone told Marilyn that way, that sage advice. And for me, someone with a chronic illness who battles it day after day after day. In fact, I know, Mark, you're a night owl, but for me, I've had to take 2 naps today, to be honest with, and drink a cup of coffee at 8 o'clock tonight just to be awake this late for me. But I would, first of all, the person that is, for the friend that is standing by, it's never too late to reach out your hand and say, I'm sorry. Even if it's been years later, you could just say, I'm sorry. Or if you don't want to call, send a card, but I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry that I wasn't there for you. I'm sorry I didn't know how to handle it better. I am sorry. Period. I have personally felt almost betrayed by people that I was surprised that did not reach out. And then yet also just as surprised by the community of people that I did not know very well who did reach out. So it's, and just sometimes people just don't know how to react to things. And we understand that. At least I understand it. I'm sure Marilyn does too. But when you're on the watching end, the sidelines, and you're watching someone go through it, um, I would just say it's never too late to step back in and say, I don't think I handled it really good,
Mm.
and I wish I had done better. Would you please forgive me?
Oh, wow. Um,
And that's all you have to say.
Marilyn, I want to give you the last word because this was kind of a curve that I threw at both of you because the book isn't about how to deal with a stricken person. It's how to deal with a grief, But Marilyn, you've been through grief. You have, I assume that you had friends, have friends, um, and people. The hard thing about grief, okay, the hard thing about grief is people would say things like, well, everybody has to handle it in their own way and however long that takes. Well, yeah, I'm okay with that. But 5 years later, when you can't go to work, maybe that's taking a little too long. What are some of the things in your journey through grief? What's one of the best examples of a friend ministering to you, and what's one of the worst?
Well, first of all, let me just say that someone's grief and their journey is as unique as their fingerprints. There is no one size fits all. There's no formula for how someone is supposed to grieve or how long they're supposed to grieve. I mean, I know of a woman whose husband died on Wednesday, and Sunday she was singing in the choir, and everybody thought, isn't that wonderful? On the other hand, I have another friend who didn't darken the door of a church for 4 months because she couldn't do it. And both were right for them.
Mm-hmm.
Your question about the ones who, well, when we were in the cardiac waiting room of the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
we thought my husband was going to have stents put in, which they were trying to do.
Right.
And we had a chaplain who came into the waiting room and felt it was his duty to take over. We had long distance calls to make. We were praying. It was our time to be together, and he was incessantly talking.
Mm-hmm.
My son-in-law is a pastor, and he told my son-in-law, "You don't have to be the pastor tonight. I'm here." And finally, my daughter told her husband, "Please have that man leave." And there's a Spanish proverb that says, "Conversation should improve silence," and he did not.
Right.
He did not do that. He did not do that. That was probably my worst example. Well, I've had a few bad ones, but that stands out because it is in complete contrast to the neighbors who picked us up at the airport when my daughter and I landed in Charlotte. They met us at the airport. My daughter Kate and I sat in the back seat. Don was driving, and Linda turned around to me and she said, "You can tell me as little or as much as you want."
Wow.
And I just saw her this past weekend, actually. But that has stuck with me as it was an amazing grace because she, I'm sure, had 20 questions. She had the bare bones information about what happened. But that was very special to me.
Wow. Ladies, well, let me share because the worst thing, while we're waiting on the funeral, the family assembles, around the house. You got a lot of visitors in it. I don't even remember who it was. But you mentioned triggers earlier. Someone said, Mark, I know exactly how you feel. I detonated. Poor fella. I mean, it wasn't that bad, but I took it. It all came out, and he bore the brunt. He made a mistake, but he got punished for everybody else's mistake in my grief. The thing that burdens me the most about grief, on the subject of dealing with those who are grieving, ministering to those who are grieving, is I'm a football coach. I've been a personal trainer. I'm one of these, get your you know what off, up, dust yourself off, get back on that horse and ride, cowboy up. And that has served me well. And through that I have helped other men. But this one friend, he knew it was coming. I mean, folks, how did you think the book was going to end? It was terminal. There was nothing anybody could do. This went on for about over 2 years. And then his wife is gone, and he is overwhelmed in grief. Went to the funeral service. It lasted for 2.5 hours. And I thought, this is crazy. We don't need to wallow. And that's the word I would describe, wallow in it. And he wouldn't get over it. And I thought to myself, I have never felt so ill-equipped to minister to someone in my life. He's hoarding up her tennis shoes. You talk about those triggers. He was accumulating triggers. He was building memorials to her all over the place where he just stayed. And there came a point that I had to disengage.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't carry the baggage too. He lost a wife, I lost a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing I said that I thought might have hit pay dirt is I said, do you think if she were in heaven, if she could talk to you right now, do you think she would want you to be doing what you're doing? Or would she want you to live your life? You're not dead yet. That's as close as I came to shaking him. But your book's not about how to handle people going through grief, but it came up. So,
Okay.
ladies, I have so enjoyed hearing both of you share. You don't know this, but this broadcast has gone about as messy as a crime scene. The signal between us and the restreaming server that then sends it to all the places, there is something seriously wrong, and very little this thing has come out in bits and pieces, and I don't know the extent of the damage, but I would like to ask that both of you, let's make an arrangement to reschedule what we've done tonight. I know that it'll be repetitive, but I hope that we can have you back, because when I go look at the damage, I'm certain that it will be extensive and exhaustive. And I think that the personalities and the acquaintance with grief that you each have needs to be shared. And I just hate it that the electrons are just not flowing tonight. I'm seeing yellow lights, I'm seeing red lights, and I'm seeing a few green lights. It's literally going back and forth, and these things happen. But Marilyn and April, thank you so much. Let's get together and try this again. But thank God for both of you and what you're doing, and for the Lord and His kingdom. And we appreciate you sharing with us tonight.
Thank you.
All
and
right.
We'll see you again.
I think we will. Hey, that is the view, by the way, high atop the Eagle's Nest broadcast facilities here at pjnet.tv. In shambles though they may be. Okay, well, that's going to wrap it up for tonight. We will 2 questions that I ask myself. And it's helped me, and maybe it'll help you. Here's the first question. What is the boldest thing that you have ever done for Jesus Christ? Now, that's the first. There are 2. Here's the second question. How long ago was that? let's not be satisfied with either answer.